Good evening and welcome to this Institute of Directors London region webinar, Property Going Zero Carbon, the Impact. We have a terrific expert panel here with us this evening, and I'm certainly looking forward to hearing their wise views and insights that they're going to bring to us in this very important topic. My name is David Stringer Lamar, and I have the honour of being the chair of the Institute of Directors London region. 4,500 business leaders here in London itself, one of the powerhouses, of course, not just of the UK economy, but also the global economy. Tonight's webinar, I'm very pleased to say, is sponsored by Green Towers, and in fact Green Towers is a technology and boutique development company specializing in sustainable residential high-rises. They developed the first fully glazed tall building facade which is qualified for passive house, saving 80% of the energy and 50% of the carbon footprint compared to typical new high rises. A great fit for a sponsor. Roland Weber is their CEO and founder, and I'm very pleased he's here with us this evening. Roland, may I invite you to make some comments? Over to you, Roland.
Yeah, thank you, David. And climate change is not in quarantine, isn't it? Our energy is rapidly becoming clean. Our challenges in transport are addressed, yet we don't really know what to do with our buildings. 30% of UK's entire carbon footprint comes from household heating. In 2050, Europe and the UK want to be carbon neutral. Unfortunately, we know that 80% of the buildings of 2050 exist today already. Yet a roadmap towards carbon neutrality is not even announced. I find this surprising because the technology to make buildings nearly carbon zero is available at affordable cost already. The Passive House Institute in Darmstadt has pioneered this for over 20 years, and it's well proven in the UK. 2,500 passive house projects have been built in Germany alone, hundreds of them performance reviewed. The extra investment cost for new builds, are typically around 4% of construction. And in all fairness, of course, refurbishments of existing buildings are more tricky. So to speak, pulling a warm pullover over your building, your existing building, requires a lot of technical expertise. And it's also challenging for the little house owner and the tenant and the landlord to get all this organized with the tenants living in the middle of it. Nevertheless, if we want buildings which are nearly carbon zero, refurbishing them towards a passive house standard is the best way to go. Yes, to conclude this, if we want to become carbon neutral, our existing building stock is the elephant in the room. In my view, we will need to refurbish them close to or up to passive house standards. Doing this with our new builds, for me, is a no-brainer. And what we need really is leadership and a tipping point. Thank you all for that, and over to Richard.
Thank you, Roland. That was fascinating, and I don't know if we'll be able to answer all those issues and questions this evening, but we'll certainly give it a good shot. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope you get something very valuable out of our discussion this evening. Action. We want to share insights and stimulate action. That's what this is all about. So what I wanted to lead off with, this is a very, very incredibly important topic in real estate. And so we really thought it'd be worth looking at. To underline the rising importance, just a couple of points. The World Economic Forum in their Global Risks Report earlier in this year in January, for the first time, the top 5 risks in terms of likelihood were all cited as environmental. This was pre-COVID, of course, but potentially these are more long-lasting problems. Furthermore, just a few weeks ago, the Urban Land Institute and Heitman, an real estate investment manager, came out with a new report, Climate Risk in Real Estate. And that focuses on a lack of market level assessment around climate risks, which they hope to plan to fix going forward with implementing some sort of framework. But interesting couple of points that came out of that report that I looked at. A few investors are suspending acquisitions or reducing their real estate footprint in city markets where there's a significant climate concern risk. One example was cited as Edinburgh. One investment manager shared a concern about future sea level rises on a potential acquisition there, which prompted an investigation into the city's infrastructure plans for the surrounding area. If flood risk came back as something unfixable, then they would exclude the city from future acquisition plans. Now, these are pretty staggering moves, and I think it highlights the importance of this issue, and it won't go away. Before we meet the panel, I'd like Jeremy, who's assisting us with the tech, we have a quick poll that we'd like to run, just to get views from the audience on one very brief question. It's a quick yes or no answer. Do you think property going zero carbon is achievable? Now, everybody should be able to just click and answer that question. So if you could all start doing that and submit your, don't forget to click the submit button at the bottom. And then in the end, in about another 10 seconds, we'll leave it open. Jeremy will tabulate the results and we'll see what we get. So I'll count this down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Jeremy, if we can close that and let's see what the results say. Well, there we have it. The vast majority of the group, 78%, think zero carbon is achievable. Well, that should give our panel something to discuss and to give us some feedback on. Great. Well, just to kick off then, our panel tonight, some very capable people. We've got Katie Warwick, who is a director at estate agency Savills, head of London Residential Development Research, and she'll share some perspectives on how consumers feel about climate change, what they want, and what the industry and government response is or needs to be. We also have Alan Fogarty, partner at the engineering consultancy Cundall, and head of their specialist environmental building physics group. Alan also, interestingly, chairs the UK Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government's 2020 Part L non-domestic working group, which is looking at proposals for revising building regs to meet carbon reduction standards. We then have Ricardo Abello, director at Franklin Templeton, and he manages several real estate investments focused on achieving environmental, social, and economic impact objectives. So he'll give us views from an investor's perspective. And then finally, Rebecca Self, Director of Sustainable Finance at the environmental consultancy South Pole, also former CFO of Sustainable Finance at HSBC, bringing her view on providing finance to achieve carbon reduction objectives. So with that, Katie, over to you to take it away.
Thank you. So just to sort of add on to that, climate change, one of the biggest issues everyone is facing at the moment across different industries, and property is, of course, no exception, a big contributor to those emissions. And really sadly, emissions have been rising, and the current pledges and policies, they don't quite get us where we need to be to reach that Paris Agreement. So, we need to be at zero by the mid-century. There's a big task ahead of us. But for my next slide, I'm just going to focus on what people want from their homes, because we have done some interesting surveys on what consumers want. And in particular, we've been surveying our Savills applicants, so people who are looking to buy a property, residential property, over the course of lockdown, to try and understand how is the impact of lockdown really affecting what people want from their property. And there were a whole different range of things that we were asking them from around, ability to work from home and what they want in terms of things to support them from that perspective. But one of the interesting things that came out of it was around green credentials of their home. So 49% of the people that we surveyed said that green credentials of their home had become more important to them throughout the period of lockdown. So this latest survey was done in August, and unsurprisingly, 62%, majority said that the amount of garden or outside space had also become more important. But don't just take our word for it. There are other surveys out there. We love a survey in the research team. So Red Road National House Builder did a survey of their prospective buyers, and almost a third, so 29%, said that energy efficiency was the most important feature of a new home. And I just thought that's extraordinary, because I bet if we'd have surveyed those people even 2 years ago, I don't think energy efficiency would have been that high up their list of of features. And then one of the questions that we get asked a lot is there a premium emerging for more environmentally friendly properties? And again, in the research team, we're always after the data and trying to prove these points. And one set of data that we do have that can give us a steer on where this is heading is the energy performance certificates of properties. So we've analysed what the ratings are for the price compared to a band D average for each of those EPC ratings that you can see on the chart there. And you can see, look, the higher the EPC rating, there is more of a premium. And this is emerging in particular in the second-hand market. Of course, new build properties are going to be, their majority A and B anyway, so they will have a higher rating. But of course, that sort of, whether it's a green premium, or a new build premium, it's very hard to sort of narrow down exactly what it is driving that. So I would some caution onto this for the developers who might look at this chart and say, great, I'll make it very green, very sustainable, but I'd also whack a great big price tag on that. I'm not sure that it works quite that way. Things have changed. Consumers really want it in the minds of the consumer, more than ever before. They really want to see a different product. But my message for developers would, of course, be cautious of this green premium. It's not necessarily evident at the moment that consumers will pay more, though whether they can pay more. Affordability is such an issue in the residential market. Could it be more of a brown discount instead, as people in the commercial world sort of view these things? LNG and other big investors have gone on record saying that they will divest if the companies that they're looking to invest in, if they don't have a strong enough ESG agenda. So I think that that's a really bold statement. And I think regulation is coming. We need to prepare. So whether you're a landlord or a developer, if you're a developer, it's coming through the planning system. If you're a landlord, did you know that the government is consulting on raising the EPC standard to C, to make that compulsory for new lets by 2025, 2028. So that's my final message. Is it seems now a good time to hand back to Richard and the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Katie. That was some fascinating information. Brown discounts. I like the sound of that. That sounds interesting. Well, great. Well, now we're going to go over to Alan Fogarty, who's going to talk to us about how do we get there.
Thank you, Richard. So yes, I'm going to talk about zero carbon, what it means, and what it means for new buildings, and what it means for existing stock. This is the strategy we deploy in relation to achieving a net zero carbon building, and these steps are generally mostly in priority. So the very first thing you look at is the passive design. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about each of these steps. Reducing operational energy consumption. So in principle, a building shouldn't use any more energy than is absolutely essential for the comfort of the occupants and the function of the business. So removing any form of waste energy. Eliminating or reducing the use of fossil fuels in buildings. On-site renewable is a laudable thing to go for, but very difficult. High-rise blocks, you can't get enough renewable energy on it to make a dent. Limiting the upfront embodied carbon, and considering whole life carbon in conjunction with whole life cost. Cost is a resource for a project, and you've got to see whether your initiatives that you're applying are giving you the best carbon reduction for the cost that's available. And then public disclosure is the final step. So it's about demonstrating to others that you can do it, and encouraging others to do the same thing, plus keeping it all honest and above board, because there's been lots of other schemes before that have promised a lot in terms of carbon reduction and have delivered very little. And green energy, you can always get green energy for your buildings, and that's fine. But the last step then is looking at carbon offsetting, because when you've done all these things, you've still got the embodied carbon of the building itself, and you are almost certainly not going to be able to get enough renewable energy onto the building to be able to compensate for the embodied carbon. So looking at offsetting needs to be done very, very carefully, and I would urge you to consider schemes that are under your control. So it could be going to a local school and replacing the LED light, or adding LED lighting to the school, or making the systems more efficient, better controls, etc. And that has a social benefit. It usually results in saving cash for the school, which they can spend on the curriculum. Lots of other schemes just don't work. There was a report there done 2 years ago, which basically identified that something like 70 to 80% of all UN offsetting schemes had little or no environmental benefit. So trees getting planted but getting burnt down or cut down before they achieve maturity. And EasyJet were suggesting that you could offsite a flight for £1 per flight. Well, that's way too cheap. It's much more expensive a problem than just a simple payment like that. And with that, I will pass you back to Richard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. That was really informative stuff, and hopefully people learned a lot from that. I'm glad you mentioned the carbon offsetting thing at the end. I was going to ask you about that later, but it's a good thing that you brought that up now. So,
and we will be closing the webinar now. So we've got, we'll do that in 10 seconds, and we look forward to welcome you to the networking. So please join us there.